I wasn't supposed to be home that night. The plan was to hit poker night with the guys, something I rarely did anymore. But halfway to Ryan's place, something made me turn the car around. Not a voice, not a hunch. Just a heavy, crawling sense under my skin, like my ribs were tightening around something rotten. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't even have a clear thought in my head as I took the exit and drove back through our neighborhood. Each house a perfect little lie behind clean windows and manicured lawns. Our house was dark, except for the faintest flicker upstairs. A bedroom light. The bedroom we barely used anymore because Shed said she needed space to sleep better and started staying in the guest room. The front door was unlocked. Strike one. Her coat thrown over the banister. Strike two. Silence, but not the calm kind. The kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. I stepped through the hallway like I wasn't in my own home. There was the soft, deliberate sound coming from above. Not loud, not obvious, but enough to make the air around me tighten like a fist. A sharp click, then another, a floorboard, and then something like laughter, low, private, too close. I took the stairs slowly. My legs didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. It was weirder than that. I felt completely still, like time paused for me alone. I opened the door to our bedroom. She was there, with him. The kind of man she used to roll her eyes at, sleeves too tight around his arms, a cocky smirk even when he wasn't talking. He didn't even bother moving away from her. Just looked at me like I'd interrupted a dinner party. And she didn't even flinch. She looked at me like I was the mailman. Like I'd walked into the wrong house. Her eyes didn't widen. Her mouth didn't drop. No shock. No guilt. Just annoyance, like I'd ruined her evening. That's when something inside me broke. But not in the way I expected. It wasn't rage. It wasn't pain. It was this cold, controlled clarity. I stepped back, turned around, and walked out. Went straight into the garage, grabbed the box I hadn't touched in years, our wedding keepsake crap, photos, notes, dried petals from some expensive bouquet she insisted on. I went back upstairs, tossed the whole thing into the middle of the room. And then I lit it. No dramatic flames. Just slow-burning reality. She jumped back, yelling. He scrambled like a coward, bumping into the dresser. She screamed my name like I'd lost my mind. But I was finally thinking straight. To hell with every lie you dressed in perfume, I said. And walked away while the fire alarm started screaming the truth I hadn't wanted to hear for months. The neighbors called the fire department. Of course they did. We live in one of those neighborhoods where everyone pretends they mind their own business but have binoculars by the windows. I stayed outside, leaned against the hood of my car as the sirens came wailing. They rushed in, full panic mode, and all I did was watch. She came running out barefoot, wearing one of my old shirts. Funny how that little detail stayed with me. Not lingerie. Not some new thing he bought her. My shirt. The one she used to sleep in when she actually wanted to be close. She shouted at me in front of the whole damn street like I was the traitor. You've lost it. What the hell is wrong with you? Not a word about what I walked in on. Not a flicker of shame. Just fury. She was pissed that I dared make a scene. That I'd taken her moment of sneaking around and burned it right in front of her little toy boy in our house. The firefighter asked if I needed medical attention. I said no. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I laughed. I said, for what? Burning the lie I've been living in. They told me the fire hadn't spread much. Just some scorched carpet and ashes. That it could have been worse. I told him it already was. Later, I sat in the back of a police cruiser, not under arrest, just cooling off, as they called it. That's when she stormed over, face red, mascara smeared, hair wild. Not from passion. From panic. The other guy was nowhere to be seen by then, probably drove off like a scared dog. She opened her mouth and let it all out. You never look at me anymore. You never see me. You're so wrapped up in your little routines, your boring life. You come home, eat, sleep, repeat. You think I don't deserve to feel something real once in a while. Real. She called that real? I stared at her and asked the only thing that mattered, how long? She crossed her arms, nostrils flaring. Don't do that. How long? Silence. Then, with this unbelievable shrug, she said, does it even matter? I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just stared at her. At the woman I once begged to marry me in a freezing park with trembling hands and a heart full of hope. And I realized I didn't know her at all. and maybe I never had. That night, I didn't go back inside. I got in my car, drove to a 24-hour diner, sat in a booth that smelled like burnt coffee, and tried to figure out what the hell just happened. My phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails. Her sister, even her mom, all trying to spin it, smooth it over, blame the stress, the routine, the marriage. But none of them saw what I saw. None of them felt what I felt when I walked into that room and watched her choose to not even care that I was watching. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in my car outside the diner for hours. Engine off. Phone face down on the passenger seat, lighting up every few seconds like a strobe. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone, especially not her. At around 5:30 a.m., I drove to the one place that still felt clean, my brother's apartment. I hadn't told him anything yet. He opened the door in his boxers, groggy and annoyed until he saw my face. "What the hell happened to you?" I stepped inside, didn't say a word for a full minute. Just stood there, hands in my pockets, staring at nothing. Then I told him everything. Not the version I thought I'd tell people someday. Not the PG version with careful words. I told him the raw, bitter truth. And he listened, didn't interrupt. Just sat on the arm of the couch like he was trying to anchor me in place. When I finished, he asked one question. "What do you want to do now?" It hit me that I didn't know. Because the man I was yesterday would have forgiven her, would have fought for her, would have convinced himself that this was a one-time thing, a stupid mistake, a bad phase. But that man died the second she looked me in the eye and didn't care that I saw everything. I spent the rest of the morning making lists. Not the emotional kind, the practical kind. Accounts we shared, the car title, the lease, the joint credit card she always said she barely used but somehow had a balance I didn't recognize. I opened a new account in my name only, changed passwords, booked a consultation with a divorce attorney for that Friday. Then, around 2 p.m. she showed up, not at the apartment, at my office, waltzed in like nothing happened. Makeup done, sunglasses on top of her head, calm, collected, smiling. My coworker thought she was just dropping off lunch or something. She didn't even look nervous. She walked right up to me at my desk and said, "Can we talk?" I stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "I have nothing to say to you." She laughed. Like this was a joke. Like I was being dramatic. "You're seriously going to end our marriage over this?" Over this. I stood up, stepped closer, leaned in just enough so only she could hear. "You ended it the moment you looked at me like I didn't matter." Her face flickered. Just for a second. The mask cracked. Then she leaned back, arms crossed, and said, "Fine. If that's how you want to play it. Play it. Like it was a game." That's when I knew. She wasn't sorry. Not for the betrayal. Not for the lies. She was sorry she got caught. And just like that, I felt something new. Not pain. Not fury. Freedom. She texted me later that night. Long paragraph after long paragraph, like she was trying to drown me in her version of events. Words like confused, lonely, emotionally neglected. Said she never planned for it to happen. That she didn't even like the guy that much. That it was just a stupid distraction. I didn't reply. She sent another one 10 minutes later. "I can't believe you're throwing everything away over one mistake." One mistake. Funny how she called it a mistake after I caught her. Not once in those messages did she ask if I was okay. Not once did she apologize in a way that didn't loop back to her being the victim. It was all me, what I didn't give her. How I wasn't there for her. How I pushed her into the arms of some smug stranger with a fake tan and an inflated ego. I went for a walk to clear my head. No destination, just one foot in front of the other. The city felt different. Louder. Meaner. Every couple I passed looked fake. Every laugh sounded hollow. I started seeing the cracks in everything. In the benches, in the neon signs, in my own damn reflection. I didn't feel like myself. I felt like a version of me had been peeled away and tossed into traffic. That's when I decided to call her sister. We'd always been close. She used to joke that she liked me more than her own blood. I figured, if anyone could give me some honest context, it'd be her. The call started off quiet. She sounded nervous. I could tell she already knew something. I asked one question. How long has this been going on? Silence. Then a shaky breath. She told me it was over a month ago. Said she ended it. Swore it was just one time. I didn't know it was still happening. I'm so sorry. My stomach turned. A month ago. That would have been around the same time she started acting more affectionate. Like she was trying to fix something without telling me it was broken. She'd cook more. Initiate conversations. Laugh at my dumb jokes again. I thought we were reconnecting. But now I saw it clearly. She wasn't fixing anything. She was covering her tracks. I hung up the phone and just stood there under a flickering streetlight, feeling like the last fool left in a magician's audience, applauding the trick even after the wires were exposed. Then came the next hit. The guy she was seeing? He wasn't just some rando. I finally found his name through a mutual connection. Let's just say he wasn't a stranger. Not to me. Not to our marriage. He was someone I'd invited to dinner. More than once. Someone I'd trusted. Someone who sat across from me at our table, complimented the food my wife cooked, looked me in the eye and asked how work was going, while knowing he was slipping into my life from the shadows like a parasite. The betrayal multiplied. I felt it in my throat, in my fists, in the pit of my chest. I could barely breathe. That night I made a decision. No more silence. No more waiting. Tomorrow I'd go back home. Not to reconcile. To confront. To end it with the kind of truth she couldn't twist. The next morning I didn't wake up, I got up. No grogginess, no stretching. Just opened my eyes like a switch had flipped and sat at the edge of my brother's worn-out couch, staring at the wall with a kind of stillness I'd never felt before. Not calm. Not peace. Just purpose. A cold, undiluted purpose. I didn't shower. I didn't change clothes. I wanted to walk in there wearing the same hoodie I wore when I saw her with him. Let her feel the weight of that moment one more time. I didn't text her. Didn't warn her. Just showed up. She was in the kitchen, drinking coffee like it was any other Wednesday. Still wearing that fake calm like it was armor. The moment she saw me, she froze. Only for a split second. Then the performance kicked in. You can't just show up here like nothing happened. I walked past her without a word, grabbed the chair at the end of the dining table, the same one he sat in that night when we had them over. I pulled it out and sat down. Looked at her. Really looked at her. She shifted. What do you want? She asked, arms crossed again. It was her signature defense move. I used to think it made her look tough. Now I saw it for what it was: deflection. I know who he is. Her eyes blinked once. Sharp. Controlled. But her jaw twitched. I continued, I know you lied to your sister. Told her it ended a month ago. Told her it was a one-time thing. I didn't. Don't. Just don't. You're not talking to the version of me that believed you anymore. She stepped closer. What do you want from me? Truth. She rolled her eyes. Now you care about the truth? I always cared. I just stopped pretending your version of it made any sense. Silence. Then, like a slow leak from a cracked pipe, she started to talk. It started when you were traveling last summer. That project in Boston. You were gone all the time. I felt alone. He was just around. You could have talked to me. I did, she snapped. I told you I felt like we were strangers. You said it was temporary. It was temporary. Her eyes narrowed, and her voice shifted into something darker, more cutting. You never listened. You always acted like your world was more important than mine. I let that sit. Say his name, I told her. What? Say his name. She looked away, so I did it for her. Chase. She flinched like I slapped her. Yeah, Chase. The guy who used to ask me for job referrals. The one I vouched for when he got laid off. The one who smiled in my face and was sleeping with my wife. I didn't mean for it to get that far. But it did. And you let it. Repeatedly. Her voice cracked then. I was scared. Of what? Of waking up in this life and realizing I don't want it anymore. Of admitting I changed. I stood up. I could have handled that. If you'd said it. If you'd been honest. But you didn't want honesty. You wanted both. She stepped toward me, reaching out. I was stupid. I stepped back. No. You were selfish. Her face changed again. No more tears. No more regret. Just cold defense. So what now? You get to feel like the hero because you didn't cheat. I almost laughed. The irony of it. The way she weaponized guilt like she was the one bleeding. No. I'm not the hero. I'm just not the coward. I walked out without looking back. And for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I didn't go far after I left. Just drove a few blocks, parked near the park where we used to walk on Sundays, and sat there staring at the empty path. It was a strange kind of grief, one I hadn't expected. I wasn't mourning her. I was mourning the version of me who thought love meant holding on no matter what. Who believed that if you just did enough, gave enough, stayed patient long enough, it would all be worth it. That version of me was dead, and I was driving the hearse. My phone buzzed again. Another message from her. We should talk again. Not like that. Calmly. I didn't reply. Then, not even 2 minutes later, a new message from Chase. That's right. He reached out. The audacity. It was short. Just said, didn't mean for things to blow up like this. Can we talk man to man? I stared at the words, stunned by the sheer emptiness of them. Didn't mean for things to blow up. Not sorry for what he did. Not sorry for crossing every line of decency. Just regret that it got messy. Called him. I don't know why. I think I wanted to hear the cowardice in his voice. And sure enough, he answered like he was expecting me to scream. Hey man, listen. No. You listen. I said, my voice level. Don't ever text me again. Don't ever say my name again. And if I ever see you near me, or anyone I care about, we'll have a different kind of conversation. He tried to interject, stammer something about not meaning harm. You came into my home. You sat at my table. And you looked me in the eye while stabbing me in the back. You don't get a chance to explain. Not now. Not ever. And I hung up. I expected relief. But what I felt was a deeper kind of clarity. Like I just deleted a virus I didn't know had infected everything. The next few days blurred into paperwork. I met with the attorney, walked through the details. She asked me if I wanted to file under irreconcilable differences or adultery. I chose adultery. I wanted it on record. I wanted the truth to have a name. That Friday, I handed her the divorce papers. She looked at the envelope like it was a grenade. I guess this is really happening, she said softly. It happened the second you opened that door for him, I replied. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stood there, arms folded, chewing her lip like she was calculating her next move. I'll be keeping the apartment until I figure things out, I said. You can take the guest room for now. I'll give you a week to move. She nodded, eyes cold. So you're done. Just like that. I was done the moment you made me feel like a stranger in my own life. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked back inside, closed the door, and left me standing in the hallway of a home that no longer felt like mine. And still, despite it all, despite the betrayal, the lies, the ugliness, I didn't regret walking away. Because staying would have been the real betrayal. To myself, the week that followed was the quietest war I've ever lived through. She stayed in the guest room, barely spoke a word. No apologies. No tears. Just silence soaked in tension. Like we were two diplomats from hostile countries forced to share the same territory. She moved like a stranger, ate at odd hours, packed slowly, deliberately, like she wanted to stretch the week into forever. I think she believed that if she made herself visible enough, some part of me would snap. That I'd cave, that I'd miss her. I didn't. One night I came home late, intentionally. Walked in to find her sitting on the couch with an old photo album open on her lap. The one we made after our honeymoon. Her eyes lifted when she saw me, but I didn't stop walking. She called my name softly, like she was testing the waters. Do you ever wonder what went wrong? I turned, looked at her. No. I know exactly what went wrong. She tilted her head, played with the edge of the page. It wasn't always bad. And yet, you made it worse. There was something bitter in her smile. You really think I'm the villain here? I think you chose to become one. She closed the album like it physically hurt her. You think it was easy for me? No, I said. I think it was convenient. She stood up suddenly, the album slipping off her lap with a thud. You always need everything to be so black and white. Maybe I made a mistake. You didn't make a mistake. You lived one. Day after day. Behind my back. With someone who knew me. There's a difference. She bit her lip hard. The mask started to slip again. I hated how invisible I felt. You used to chase me. Want me. Then you just didn't. And instead of talking to me about it, you found someone else to fill the silence. I needed to feel wanted again. And I needed a partner, I said, stepping closer. Not a liar who treats affection like currency. She stared at me, breath-catching, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something real flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, not shame. Fear. Because she knew this wasn't just a fight. This was the final conversation. I picked up the album, handed it to her. Take this with you. It doesn't belong here anymore. She held it for a second. Then, in a move that shouldn't have surprised me but still hit like a slap, she dropped it into the trash by the door. Just like that. Like none of it mattered. And maybe, to her, it didn't. She left the next morning. Didn't even say goodbye. Just left her key on the kitchen counter. The guest room stripped bare. The silence in the apartment louder than ever. And still, I didn't break. I made coffee, sat at the table, and let the silence feel like mine again. 3 days after she left, I found one of her earrings under the couch. Gold. Small. The kind she used to wear on nights she wanted to look like she wasn't trying too hard. I picked it up, turned it over in my fingers, then dropped it in the drawer by the front door without a second thought. Maybe she left it behind on purpose, maybe not. Either way, I wasn't chasing her for it. That afternoon, I got a call from her mother. Now that surprised me. We hadn't spoken since before the fallout. She'd always liked me, or at least liked how I made her daughter appear stable. But the voice on the phone wasn't warm this time. It was tight, guarded. I heard you filed. I did. Long pause. Then, she told me her side. I'm sure she did. More silence. She's not okay. That's not my job anymore. She's still your wife. No, she's not. Click. That was it. No yelling. No defense. Just a quiet little click that said more than any screaming match could. I sat with that silence for a while, letting it settle. Everyone around her was trying to keep the fantasy intact. That if they just said the right things, I'd snap back into place like a missing puzzle piece. But that puzzle had been burned. That evening, I got another message. From an old friend. One I hadn't spoken to in months. Hey, just checking in. Heard what happened. Thought you should know she's been saying it wasn't serious. That you're blowing it out of proportion. There it was. The twist of the knife. She was rewriting the ending already. Painting herself as misunderstood, impulsive, confused. Telling people I'd gone cold years ago. That I never really showed emotion. That she didn't even know why I was so angry because it wasn't that deep. Like I'd lost my mind over a fling. Like 6 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and trust could be discarded with a shoulder shrug and a few half-lies told over wine and sympathy. It should have enraged me. But it didn't. Because it confirmed something I needed to see. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. She was just busy rebranding. And that made her small. Smaller than I'd ever realized. So I did something strange. I grabbed a notebook and started writing down everything I remembered. Not the pain. Not the betrayal. Just the facts. The dinners. The road trips. The inside jokes. The good stuff. And then I closed the book, flipped it over, and on the last page wrote 3 words. It meant nothing. Because that's what she decided when she let someone else into our home, our life, our bed. Not just once, but often enough that she had time to build a story around it. The past wasn't mine to fix anymore. It was hers to carry. And mine to leave behind. I started rebuilding in quiet ways. Deleted her number, not blocked. Deleted. There's a difference. Blocking still leaves a door there, locked or not. Deleting removes the house entirely. I unfollowed her on everything. Not out of pettiness, but to stop the slow bleed of curiosity. I didn't want to see her smile in photos pretending nothing happened. I didn't want to see the fake sympathy posts, the captioned cryptic quotes about healing and growth. I knew what kind of character she played when eyes were on her. and I was done watching the performance. A week later, I ran into someone unexpected. Her best friend. It was at a grocery store of all places. I had a basket of eggs, coffee, and 2 frozen meals I didn't even want. She walked up like she hadn't just spent years enabling the woman who blew up my life. "Hey," she said, cautious. "I heard." I waited. "She's not doing great." "She is great at lying." Her expression changed. Something flickered behind her eyes. And then, in a tone that surprised me, she said, "Yeah, she lied to me too." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know about him," she said quickly. "She kept saying she was just talking to someone. Never said it was someone you knew." "She said it wasn't serious," I replied. "To me, to you, to everyone." She nodded slowly. "She's been spinning it to sound like you overreacted." Of course she had. I could see the discomfort in her friend's eyes, and for the first time, I realized something. My ex was unraveling. Slowly. Publicly. Not because of me. Not because of revenge. But because lies don't hold up under too much attention. She'd been trying to control the story, but the cracks were showing. I left the store without another word, but that moment stayed with me. Back at home, I walked into my place and saw it differently. Not haunted. Not broken. Just open. Like the energy had shifted. I'd boxed up the remnants of her pictures, old gifts, notes, and stored them out of sight. Not thrown away. Not yet. Just out of reach. I didn't need to burn the past again. I just didn't want to trip over it anymore. Then came the letter. 2 days later. Handwritten. Slid under the door in an envelope with no return address. It was her. 3 pages. First page, defense. How she felt like she was drowning. How she didn't recognize herself. How she made a horrible mistake. Second page, deflection. How I was emotionally absent. How she felt invisible. The usual chorus. But the third page? That one was different. It said, "I never thought you'd actually leave. I didn't think you had it in you." Not "I'm sorry." Not "I wish I could take it back." Just that. Like I was supposed to feel guilty for walking away from someone who lit the match and watched me burn. I folded the letter once. Twice. Then tossed it in the same drawer with the earring. Souvenirs from someone who mistook my silence for weakness. She was wrong. She'd always been wrong. It's strange how quickly a ghost becomes quiet. Weeks passed. No more messages. No calls. No uninvited appearances. It was like she'd finally understood what silence meant when it wasn't a weapon, but a sentence. I half expected her to resurface. With another version of the truth. Another plea dressed as regret. But there was nothing. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I started to rebuild, not a relationship, not a reputation, just myself. I went back to the gym. Not to get revenge. Not for some glow-up story. Just to move. To sweat out the poison that had sat in my veins since the night everything cracked open. I started calling old friends. The kind I'd quietly drifted from because marriage had become a full-time job with no overtime pay. One of them, Daniel, asked if I wanted to join him for a weekend hike. I almost said no. Then I thought, why not? We didn't talk about her. Not once. Just trees, bad jokes, and the taste of air that didn't feel heavy anymore. At the top of the hill, while drinking water and catching our breath, he looked at me and said, "You're different, man." I asked, "Better or worse?" He didn't hesitate. "Just real. Like you're not performing anymore." That stuck with me. Because the truth is, I didn't even realize how much of my life had been about performing. Saying the right things. Smiling through tension. Making excuses for someone who never made them for me. There was this one night, I remember it vividly now, months before I ever caught her. She was already distant. Already vanishing behind cold smiles. And I remember thinking, if I just hold on a little longer, maybe we'll come back. But I see it now for what it was. I was holding on to a version of her that hadn't existed in years. A version that maybe never did. I wasn't afraid of losing her. I was afraid of admitting I already had. So here I am. Apartment quieter than ever. Closet half full. Drawers finally my own. The old wedding album still sits in that trash bin, untouched. Like a monument to a war no one won. And if you're reading this, maybe you're in that in-between space. Maybe you've just discovered the lie. Or maybe you've known for a while, but haven't admitted it out loud yet. Here's what I'll tell you, don't wait for the apology that's really just a defense. Don't search their face for guilt they don't feel. And for the love of everything you've survived, don't settle for being a footnote in someone else's excuse. You're not crazy. You're not cold. You're not too much. You're just finally awake. And that's the start of everything.